introduce Aran to everyone. And just a reminder, everyone, if you haven't already changed your name to put your place next to it, do that now so that Aran who's joining us from Los Angeles, I believe, can see where you are in the world. And then and also just grab a piece of paper, a couple of pieces of paper, and something to write with, just for this design thinking workshop that we have today. And yeah, we'll be doing a design thinking workshop today. As you all know, Erin is going to share a little bit about her story as a designer, someone who focuses on service design. Leah will give her an introduction, but we'll basically spend most of the session with Erin, and then the last 15 minutes we'll take just for us so that I can prep you for Monday's session, where we'll just spend time working, finalizing and tweaking any thing that our proposals, those 1 to 2 page proposals that we've been working on, we'll have time for that on Monday. But I just want to answer any questions that are coming up as you're working on those, and make sure we have time for that at the end. So we'll do that about 15 minutes before the session ends. Okay, Leah.
Thank you, Natasha. And thank you so much, Erin, for being here. So today I have the pleasure of introducing designer, researcher, and strategist Erin Baker. Erin is passionate about the role of design in combating climate change. She received her MS in Design and Urban Ecologies from the Parsons School of Design and her MFA in Graphic Design from the Academy of Art University. She has had over 13 years of experience working as a visual designer and art director for some very notable companies such as Chobani, Condé Nast, and Oracle. And more recently, she is the co-founder of Cohere Design Lab. And we are so excited to have your talents here today for our own design thinking workshop. And Erin, if you could tell us a little bit more about Cohere Design Lab, that would be amazing. Thank you for coming.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you today, and I've been reading about your projects and your project proposals, and it sounds really inspiring. Some great projects out there. So yeah, Cohere Design Lab is a service design lab, and we're focused on building the soft infrastructure for climate resilience. So we're really focused on social infrastructure as opposed to physical infrastructure. And we call ourselves a service design lab because we require transdisciplinary knowledge too. So it's not just service designers, but it's also advisors from emergency management, from health fields. So yeah, that's why we call ourselves a lab. So should I get started?
Yes, and thank you so much, Erin. Welcome to the course. We're so excited to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, let me share screen here. Okay. And then I'll just enter full screen mode. Okay, can everyone see this? And let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to use the chat. I already posted a link there, which I'll talk about in a second. So I also taught a course called Sustainable Systems at Parsons School of Design. And I had a lot of fashion students in my class, a lot of architecture students, industrial design students. So really looking at the impacts of what we design and who we design for. What is systems thinking? So systems thinking is a great approach to tackling climate change. It's a holistic approach to analysis. It focuses on the way that a system's constituent parts interrelate and how systems work over time and within the context of larger systems. And this is a book I shared with my students called Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. And this is a really great resource. We talked about, yeah.
We actually can't see your, did you change the slide?
No.
Oh, okay. It's not in full screen mode yet, just so you know.
Oh, it is on my screen. Let's see.
That's strange.
Yeah, let me try it again here.
Is that just me or are other people? Can you see it? Is it displaying properly, Judy, for you? No. Oh, okay.
Okay, let me see here.
Sanjana says, I think she needs to share her full screen. I
Like the
wonder.
entire screen on Zoom. I think she needs to stop sharing and reshare it again.
Okay.
Sharing her entire screen.
Okay, let me see here. Stop share. Okay, and then I'll share again.
And then share entire screen. There should be an option like that. I think that would work.
Is that working now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Looks
Okay. Great.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Okay, so this is a book, Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows, that I shared with my students, and it's a really great resource. And her website is also a really good resource on systems thinking. Now, she's an influential environmental thinker, a MacArthur Fellow, and she started the Academy for Systems Change. So she felt that systems thinking is necessary for approaching today's complex problems, because we cannot be solved by fixing one piece in isolation from the others. We really have to zoom out and think about the whole system. I see a lot of you thinking about the oceans and plastics in the oceans, for example. This is a really complex issue that can't be we can't just see one part in isolation. We have to think about the whole system and how it interrelates. Yeah, I posted her website there. Check it out. But she's a really great resource about systems thinking. So what is design? Design is the process of envisioning and planning the creation of objects, interactive systems, buildings, vehicles. So a lot of people think about design as objects. So for instance, buildings or industrial design or graphic design. But there's also something called design thinking. And this is really a process for solving problems by prioritizing and putting the user at the center. And it relies on observing with empathy how people react with their environments and really employs an iterative hands-on approach. And it also involves a lot of sticky notes. So that's why I have this picture here. We use a lot of sticky notes in design thinking. So human-centered design is anchored in understanding users' needs. So really putting the user at the center, rapid prototyping, generating creative ideas that will transform the way you develop products, services, processes, and organizations. So the idea of rapid prototyping is really generating ideas quickly, not worrying about what the idea is or being critical about it, but just getting the idea out on paper, for instance. So now we're going to do a short exercise for about 3 minutes. You guys all got your paper, right? So we're going to take, so the idea is to fail often to succeed sooner. This is an IDO mantra. IDO is one of the leading thinkers in human-centered design, and they're a product design firm located in California. So fail often to succeed sooner, fail to get to that ultimate idea, right? So get everything out. So this is what we're going to do for 3 minutes now. Write down as many ideas as you can about your project idea. Don't think about what you're writing, just let it come out, kind of stream of consciousness on the paper. And we're going to take 3 minutes. I'm starting my timer now.
Erin, should these ideas be related to our projects?
Yes, absolutely. So just think about your projects, think about where you are in the process right now, and just kind of write down as many ideas as you can, whether that means engaging stakeholders, it means interviewing people, it means looking at the bigger picture, but just kind of get it down as many ideas as you can. So the idea here that I'm showing is just a bunch of circles that were empty and that someone filled with pictures. So these can be pictures that you draw too, or words. Just kind of, I just want you to write down in quick succession whatever comes to your mind about your project. So we've got about a minute left. Okay, time's up. So think of this as just a warm-up exercise. And sometimes you could even fill a paper with circles like this and do this just to get your mind freed up, just to kind of, get loose before you start work and just get your mind thinking. So this is an exercise you can do, design thinking. So now we're going to talk about the human-centered design process. So I know Beth shared with you something about this process, but I'm going to go into more depth about it. So first, there's empathize, which is learn about the audience for whom you're designing by observation and interview. So who is my user and what matters most to this person? And your user can also be nature. It doesn't have to be a person. So think about that too. If nature is your primary stakeholder, for instance, think about how you can really empathize with nature by going to sit with a tree, for instance. What can they tell you? Define, create a point of view that is based on user needs and insights. What are their needs? So you're really defining that. And then ideate is brainstorm and come up with as many creative solutions as possible. Wild ideas are encouraged. So just like we just did, get everything out on paper, ideate, really kind of brainstorm. You can use sticky notes. You can brainstorm with someone else about your project idea, which is great to get ideas out and bounce ideas off of someone. And then prototype, build a representation of one or more of your ideas to show to others. How can I show my idea? Remember, a prototype is just a rough draft. So a prototype is really something that's fun that you can use to test one of your ideas out. And then shared your prototype idea with your original user for feedback. So what worked about the idea? What didn't work? So really thinking about this is a rough idea of what you're trying to build. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the final thing, even if it's not a product, right? If it's a service or a system, it can still be prototyped. So now I'm going to talk to you about a project that I worked on in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And so Red Hook was very hard hit by Hurricane Sandy. So these are some of the pictures. On the left is the back of Red Hook, which is renters and homeowners primarily, but this is a street right near the grocery store. I mean, this shows you the level of water that happened. This was late October when it happened, so it was cold, and the power was out. On the right is around the Red Hook houses. Now, Red Hook has the second largest public housing development in New York City. So it's very large public housing. And this is for low-income residents in Red Hook, primarily African-American. But the power was out for a long time, for over 2.5, 3 weeks. You can see kind of the level of water there and the cars floating in the street. And my project really began with interviewing a medical student who went door to door during Hurricane Sandy in the public housing because the power was out and because people were stranded. And he wanted to see if anyone needed help, medical attention. So a lot of people on oxygen, a lot of people with heart conditions, for instance, that had no way of getting that medical care. And there was no system in place in Red Hook at the time, in New York City at the time, for something like this to happen. And Red Hook's already cut off from services. So he saw about 400 people in the Red Hook houses, connected everyone he saw to the care that they needed. And the conditions were pretty dire. I mean, residents were boiling water to stay warm in the public housing. The elevators were out. There was no way to go anywhere because it was so flooded outside and it was cold. So it was kind of a really remarkable effort by this medical student. And we talked about how can we create something preemptively so this doesn't happen again? How can we create a community-based system or service, essentially, to make sure everyone stays connected to care and connected to each other if there's another Sandy, or even in rising heat, because heat is a really big concern now in cities. So I came in as a designer, and I talked to him and I thought, design can really play a role here, particularly service design and human-centered design, the type of design that I do. Because I knew that if we created something, it would have to be created with residents, and they would have to have ownership in that kind of design process. So this is Red Hook's situation. And basically, this is the floodplain is in blue here on the map. This is what happened during Sandy. And there's one small clinic, and it was flooded during Sandy, and it closed, one small medical clinic. So the nearest hospitals are over 2.5 miles away. So we really see the need for something that's localized here. And Red Hook is already cut off from services. There's no subway, there's no direct subway line into Red Hook. All the buses were shut down. People were actually biking and walking into the neighborhood to help out because there was no other way of getting into the neighborhood. Everything was so badly flooded. And it was a really remarkable effort how everyone kind of rallied around each other. There was one of the nonprofits that opened their doors and everything. But here I want to talk about these overlapping systems, because what Sandy did was highlight systemic inequalities that were already there. We've got systemic racism, systemic inequality, and the public housing was built in a really precarious situation in New York City. It was built in the floodplain. So, the fact that Red Hook was already cut off from services, it was all really compounded by Sandy, and it kind of shone a spotlight on the neighborhood in a way. We've also got an aging population there. So we see all these overlapping, intersecting problems. And that's how we use systems thinking in design. So first I started by interviewing Red Hook residents that had been impacted during Sandy. So people on oxygen, I interviewed, for instance, someone called Rosa who has chronic asthma and can't leave her apartment. And she's really concerned about another Sandy happening because she relies on nebulizers that have to be plugged in. So she's always kind of on the lookout about the news, what's happening. Is there going to be a heat wave coming, for instance? She stays connected to her doctors. And she was really interested in what we were trying to do because, she really sees the need for such a support system. And here is, so I had to create something called an innovation brief so our support came through the local city council person in Red Hook, who was kind of the local legislative leader in Red Hook. And so in order to get the support for the project, I had to be able to visualize what this future check-in system might look like, which is future support system might look like. So, here it's the year 2020 and the Red Hook check-in support initiative is running smoothly. Another hurricane hits, but this time people are prepared ahead of time. So Mrs. Smith in the Red Hook houses west hears Molly, her volunteer, knocking on her door. She feels safe and at relative ease despite the mounting water outside her window. So the thought bubble in the little pink bubbles on the left, it's Mrs. Smith, like, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. And then out on the street, we've got someone coordinating with supplies to be brought over. In the middle, we have a check-in station. So perhaps people go check in on residents closer to the water and come back and enter their findings here. And then on the right, we've got a doctor administering care to someone who needs medical attention here. So that's a way through design to be able to visualize the future, because people need to be able to see and understand what a future scenario might look like. So that's how we use design in this case. And early on, we were engaging with the Department of Health, which is the New York City-wide Department of Health. the Department of Emergency Management, the Center for Health Equity. So with all of these stakeholders, I needed to be able to share something with them like this so they could sort of be able to visualize it also. And this is kind of a roadmap of what I was planning on doing. So this is a proof of concept phase, which I'm going to share with you, which was July 2016 to September 2016. And our goals, and again, this is empathize and initial prototypes. What can this be? So we had a series of workshops with residents to gather feedback and test ideas using different scenarios to prototype communication and functionality. We had interviews with residents. We had information sessions at the senior center. And the outcomes are really a better understanding of experiences and concerns to inform the design process. Now, the next stage was going to be aligning with nonprofits in the neighborhood, starting to align and link up with other stakeholders in the neighborhood that are necessary for this support team, and create a working prototype. Test the functionality with a small group, and then would be to run a pilot. So that would be a small pilot with all of the features in place. And, you still would be testing and prototyping that as you go. So this is kind of my overall roadmap here. So this stage I'm going to share with you is really the ideate and prototype stage of our proof of concept phase. So we had a series of stakeholder mapping workshops with residents in the local library, in the Red Hook Library. And we had materials donated from IKEA, which is a store in the neighborhood. And they were really interested in social impact work and getting involved. So these little figurines were donated from IKEA, and we had little vehicles and things that we used to signify buildings. And for this exercise, we were really looking at what are the assets in the neighborhood? What is the support that's already there that we can build upon? And who do we reach out to for support? I was really looking at what is the support that we already have. So here we have the 6th floor ladies in green here who, already check in on each other. So these are women that were identified by someone in the workshop, like, hey, yeah, I know someone who already checks in on her because she's always alone. And her neighbor knows that, so she checks in to see if she needs anything. We have the Mikio Center, which was a community center that was really instrumental during Sandy, and supplies were brought there, for instance. And we know that that's a cooling center too, where people can go to get cool if there's a heat wave. So these community centers are really important in the neighborhood. And then we have the police and the firemen over here. And the more we do this exercise, the more we start to see a network happening. So we've got the Mikio Center, we've got the Red Hook Initiative, another organization. One of the churches is identified up in the top. And then we've got the police and fire. This is a tabletop exercise that can be done pretty easily. It's great to use like little figurines or something that symbolizes what you're talking about. And so here's just some more pictures, close-up pictures of that. One of the residents in Red Hook, this is Val. She became an important community organizer for the project. I paid her a stipend to help me with community organizing in the neighborhood. So she was part of our core team. So we start to see a support team. There's a little guy with a cell phone. So everyone kind of had fun with these little figurines. We also prototype things like, this is a refrigerator magnet that would be in someone's apartment. And we made this out of paper. And this is an example of a rough prototype. So we were really testing this idea out. The refrigerator magnet could list emergency contacts, your medications that you take, your primary care doctor information, any concerns that you have. So we were able to talk through this and make updates depending on if it worked or it didn't work. So this is an example of a rough prototype. And then that led to improvisation. So again, these are materials we had donated from IKEA. We actually staged an apartment in the library. So we were able to kind of block off an area of the room. and staged an apartment, set up a little kitchen and an entryway with the cones here. Now, improvisation is a great tool for prototyping because it allows you to role play through something and test ideas pretty rapidly when you're if you're checking in on someone, how do we talk to each other? What do we need? What does each person need? What are we wearing? Are we wearing an official vest or a badge, or, how does it feel to have someone knock on your door? So we were prototyping all of this, and it's a really good tool for that. And everyone had a lot of fun. These again are the materials that we had donated from IKEA. So we had all kinds of stuff donated. This is kind of prototyping through in that little apartment area, how the refrigerator magnet would work. What medications are you taking? Who is your doctor? For instance, again, we had, everyone had a lot of fun with it. And we would switch. So we would have, one pair role playing through the check-in, and then we would switch out and have everyone in the room participate, which was a good way to have more ideas generated and have everyone involved and engaged. There's just some more pictures of the props that we used and people in the workshop. And so now I just want to transition to the stakeholder map. So for the next portion of our workshop, we're going to focus on stakeholder mapping. And this is something I created to be able to understand the different stakeholders involved in the project and who we needed to engage, because it was pretty complex. We had local, we had kind of the meso level, which is organizations, like nonprofit organizations, and then we had the citywide level. So this is a great way to be able to visualize who your stakeholders are. So in the middle, the darker pink circle are our current collaborators and our kind of our core team in the neighborhood. So this included the city council person who gave us support. This included Red Hook residents and local leaders. Local Leaders is an initiative of one of the nonprofits. But those were our core team. And then on the darker pink ring outside of that are other organizations in the neighborhood that we needed to engage. So we've got a grocery store, Fairway. We've got the police and fire department, churches and faith groups, medical expertise, the Old Timers Committee, which is a committee of seniors that's really active in the neighborhood, the public library, for instance, and then or other nonprofit organizations. So that's kind of the next tier of stakeholders that are immediately important to the project. And then in the lighter pink on the outside circle are the New York City Department of Health, the Medical Reserve Corps, which is kind of a larger national initiative, but it's locally, it's located in New York City also, the Center for Health Equity, the Red Cross, local hospitals and clinics, for instance, visiting nurse services, Meals on Wheels, those larger citywide organizations that eventually we would have to link with, but right now they're kind of like on standby. So this is a way to visualize this and really cluster those stakeholders so you can figure out who it is you need to reach out to first and who's essential to the project at the beginning, the middle, and the later stages of the project. Yeah, so this is a really important tool, design tool that that we can use, and we're going to be working on that. Basically, that's my presentation. I just want to leave it kind of open for questions and comments now. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks so much, Aran. That's really helpful. And I think we're all, as you know, in project mode at the moment, and we're kind of, it's really helpful to learn about some of these tools of how we actually do like ideation, prototyping, building stakeholder maps. I know we're going to do a little bit of that in the session today as well. So everyone, feel free to just start sending in any questions, any quick questions you have in the chat. And then I guess Aran will transition to a stakeholder mapping exercise after that. Does that sound good? Okay, so we have a question here. From Daniel, in your opinion, what is the most important phase of human-centered design? Maybe I'll let Daniel come on and ask his question, sorry, so you can actually meet him.
Okay, hello everyone. Hi, Aaron. Thank you for your
Hi.
presentation.
Hi.
Okay, I want to know, in your opinion, what is the most important phase of human-centered design?
I think that that empathize phase is really the most important. Really understanding who your user is. Now, the term user is really used in product design and that sort of design profession, but you know, that's the person that ultimately you're designing with and for. So you've really got to understand what are their needs, where are they coming from, and that happens through interviews and through observation. So you can really learn a lot by understanding the context of where someone is living, for instance, or what's around them. So it happens through observation and interviews. That really sets the stage for the rest of the design process.
Okay, thank you.
During the empathize phase, how many people should we talk to? Is there a number or percentage? I think this really depends on what you're trying to achieve here, because it can be, you know, if you're, I think a good rule for interviews is like at least 4 to 5 interviews. That's what we did in Red Hook, because you want to get, you know, as many different perspectives as you can and learn about as many people as you can. Yeah, I think it really depends on the scale of your project and the kind of the context of the sort of problem you're trying to solve. Yeah.
Thanks, Erin. We have another question here in the chat from Maria, if you want to. Oh, she says there's too much noise in her background, so she will write it. In which step of the design thinking do you think we can take into account the risks of our project? For instance, do we have to design a plan B in which we identify a risk?
Yeah, so I think in terms of risk, in that prototype and test phase, really identify and try to get out as many of the risks as you can in that phase, whether it's just writing them down on paper, on individual sticky notes and putting them on the wall. I really like to do that. So if it's this scenario, what are the risks that could happen here? You know, so getting that all up on the wall on sticky notes, for instance, you can kind of see things and move them around. Oh, risk A, problem B, you know, and kind of, so you can sort of test what the scenario is going to be through improvisation or through talk, you know, just different prototypes. You can test those risks out, but it's important to identify those risks in that kind of prototype phase, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Ella as well. I'll just read it for you because I know we have to move on after this. So she says, I feel like oftentimes working within communities, especially marginalized ones, sometimes people take over situations without fully regarding the historical and social context. How do you make sure to not take away from the on-the-ground experiences and contexts and fully center the voices of community without your own bias?
This is a really good question. And this is something designers grapple with all the time. How to do this and how to facilitate this design process without really putting yourself in the center, because it's not about you. It's really about everyone in the room, and you're co-designing and you're creating this together, and you want to make sure you hear everyone's voices. So I think the empathize phase is also really important to understand the context and as much of the history and the context as you can. And that could involve just interviewing different people, a lot of research. So I did a lot of research. This is over a year of research about Red Hook before I even started this design project. So Red Hook used to be a marshland. The public housing was built on the marshland. Why was it built there? And what is the history of that? And then I tried to talk to as many people in the neighborhood as I could. I reached out to the heads of the public housing, the senior groups. I tried to identify leaders and connectors in the neighborhood, like Val, who knew everyone. She knew everyone. And so she was really passionate about this work and wanted to be involved. And I wanted to give her ownership of that. And that's why I paid her as part of our core team. And I think it's really important to be there, to listen foremost, and as most importantly to listen, to open up the floor for people to talk about their experiences. And this is something that people were not used to. They were not used to work like this. They were used to people coming in, like there was a flood wall that was going to be built in Red Hook, and the architects came in and did a design charrette in a day, and wanted feedback from the neighborhood because that was part of their design process. But that's not a way to engage a community long-term over time. That's not a way to build trust in the neighborhood. So I think that there's a great opportunity for human-centered design to really do things differently. But that's a great question because it's something that we always grapple with. Yeah.
Thanks, Erin. We have a question from Amarachi that actually connects with, I think, the next exercise we'll be doing. She says, how do you identify your key stakeholders?
Yeah, here I think it's important to really identify first, to do the empathize phase, maybe first, interview people, really understand what it is, the issue that you're trying to design for, and then think about who you need as a partner or as an advisor to be able to create that. So it's good to start with kind of immediately around you, or around the area that you are designing in, thinking about who are those people, and then building out from there.
Awesome. Shall we transition now to the stakeholder?
Sure. Yeah, okay, great. So here I want you to now, with your paper, draw 3 concentric circles like this. So it doesn't have to be neat. Don't worry about if they're perfect circles or not. Just draw the circles as you see them here, 3 concentric circles. We'll take a few minutes to do that on your paper. Does everyone have them? Pretty much. All right. Next, I want you to really write down here in the middle circle, your core team or your immediate stakeholders. Who do you need to engage? Absolutely need to engage for this project to happen. So really think about who are those really essential people that are right there with you on the project. And then in the middle circle, who are your essential stakeholders and organizations? Who are the people that, and you don't have to think about, like, so my stakeholder map was really geographical almost. So it was really like local in the neighborhood and then larger in the city. It doesn't have to, you don't have to do it like that. You can if you want to, but this is a way to do it as, that middle circle is your essential stakeholders and organizations that you're going to reach out to next, for instance. Who are those people that they're going to have to be involved, but maybe not immediately, right? And then the larger circle are your eventual stakeholders and partner organizations. So I like doing it like this rather than geographically, but you can do it geographically too if it makes sense for your project. Yeah, so we're going to take about 15 minutes to do this exercise. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat. And I know a lot from reading your project descriptions, a lot of you have a lot of multiple stakeholders involved that you needed to engage with and that you want to engage with. So this is a really good way to visualize that, start to think about who you're going to talk to first and who you're going to talk to in the next 6 weeks of the course too. So let's take about 5 more minutes for this exercise. So kind of think about wrapping up where you are. If you don't have all your stakeholders down, that's okay. Just think about, those most important stakeholders that you need to engage maybe first. And then I'm going to ask a couple people to share their examples and talk through their stakeholder map. So let's take about 5 more minutes. We got about 1 minute left. Okay, so we'll pause here. So I just want to see if there's a couple of volunteers who would want to share their name, kind of a little bit about their project and about the stakeholder mapping process. If you thought it was helpful, and any challenges that you're running up against that you want to address with the group and with us to ask questions about that stakeholder engagement. So do we have a couple of volunteers? Anyone want to go first? And you can just kind of show your stakeholder map. It's going to be hard to see, but kind of hold it up so we can see it to the screen, just to show us. And then you can just talk through the stakeholder map. Any volunteers?
I can start if no one is ready.
Okay, great, Caesar. Yeah.
My project is a guerrilla seed bomb, which is scattering seeds that are seeds for plants that will host pollinators.
Great.
And so the target area that I had identified is in Ambler, where Ambler, Pennsylvania is a Superfund site, because in the 50s, 40s, it is where asbestos was made. And finally, in the 70s, when asbestos was identified as the #1 carcinogen in the area, then subsequent proclamations blocked a site that would. So nobody goes there. It is beautifully fenced, but seed bombs can be thrown in there in such a way that it can become a protected area for pollinators to congregate. I believe insects will not have to deal with lung ailments. So here is my circle. I don't know, there.
Yep, great. Okay.
My core team would be a couple of friends of mine who are interested in collaborating with me on the project. And we have history of working together in many environmental projects, from creek cleanings and all that. And also another part is the organization of which I am a part of is the community colleges student environmental club. Now, the second layer of essential stakeholders that would be helping me in this project will be, one is Back to Earth Composting. It's a local business, small business, and I've always highlighted or appreciated this organization. I've seen it from the beginning, from scratch, where a passion for sustainability can also become not only a sustainable career, but it can also be a financially viable business. And this business is women-owned, women-run, and I've been part of this. I've enjoyed these ladies, and of course, one or two, or the founder, the owner of this business is one of my core team members. Back to Earth Composting, where they collect biodegradable kitchen stuff and then return it to the household already in a compost form. And I'm going to use a compost soil for the small seed bombs. And secondly, also, I had the Wissahickon Trail organization. It's a local preservation nonprofit organization that preserves the viability of the trail system within the Wissahickon River in order for the local population to be a site for recreation and nature and preserve. And also, of course, the Montgomery County Community College President's Council of Sustainability. So I would need their advice, their resources, and their support for me to be able to do this. And the outer eventual stakeholders and partner organizations would be the local borough councils. the councils, there are two towns at least, Ambler and Plymouth Meeting, where I can network with their environmental advisory councils.
Mhm.
And in order to get that kind of uh, uh, permission to be able to walk around the neighborhood, instruct people of what we're about, knock door to door, or participate and join in their meetings, just so to bring about awareness that we are doing this.
Mhm. Any questions or challenges you have around this, or are you just going to kind of go step by step here?
Yes, one of the challenges that we've been dealing with, where of course, as I was talking about it with my core team, is of course the attitudes of we are in an environment of politically divided, where environmental tree huggers, all that, and then you have the other side where. But I am of the opinion that I think the main obstacle for me to do is just inertia.
Mhm.
People would love to do things for the environment, but there is no catalyst that will move them out of their comfort zones. And if there's a catalyst, like a seed bomb project, that would get them out of the couch to walk around the garden, to walk around the neighborhood, throw the seeds, somehow I will have gained my goal. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
when I make people, to me, this may be a very simple goal, but my aim is, once I start them thinking, I already achieved my objective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
It sounds like a great project. I'm familiar with that area in Pennsylvania, the Wissahickon, I know. So yeah, that sounds like a really great project. Do we have time for one more share? I think we should focus on challenges identified through the stakeholder map. Does someone else want to share their example? Just quickly talking, really focusing on those challenges and questions.
Just been scrolling through my, making sure I can see everyone. I don't think anyone has a hand up.
Any questions about this, about the stakeholder mapping exercise, or how you can use this tool moving forward?
Cecilia has her hand up.
Yeah.
Cecilia, feel free to mute.
Hi. I have a quick question. Like, so in the stakeholder map, would our, audience be anywhere? I mean, like, let's say the people who would benefit from our project, should we place them anywhere? Even if we don't, for example, in my case, that would be kids in elementary schools. So where should I place them?
I mean, I would place them in the center. You can absolutely do this where you have, instead of having your core team, for instance, you place that group in the center, and then you can have your core team in the slightly outer ring, for instance. I think it's really important to place that user or that group in the center. Absolutely, you can do that.
Okay. Yeah.
If that helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was part of our stakeholder map, where Red Hook residents were right in the center as part of our core team in designing in the design process. Yeah. Any other questions before we move on to the next? Okay. All right, let's move on to the next what exercise I want you to do, and we can just spend 5 or 6 minutes on this, but is your project timeline in the human-centered design process. So maybe we could use this human-centered design process as a loose framework for our project work in the next 6 weeks, if you think it's helpful. So, you know, again, thinking loosely, if your project is not a product, don't worry about it. If it's not design based, don't worry about it at all. But how can you use this idea and this framework to really set the stage for your project? Because you only have the 6 weeks in the course. So, you know, think about this, and I can leave this slide up if you want, but I just put an example here, you know, outline. So maybe draw a little chart of the next 6 weeks. And maybe, you know, those first 2 weeks are empathize. And then week 3 is define and ideate. And week 4 is prototype. And week 6 is prototype and test, for instance. Maybe you don't get to the testing phase. That's absolutely fine. But if you can start prototyping something, you know, that's really helpful in the next 6 weeks. But what realistically can you achieve given the time that you have left in the course? So let's take about I don't know, like 8 minutes or so to do this exercise, and just really thinking about what those achievable goals are in the next 6 weeks. And do you want me to leave this slide up, or do you want me to leave this one up? Which is more helpful?
I think maybe leave the first one up just so that
Okay.
we can remember what each part is about.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, could you please place the other one so that in order to see the timeline?
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take a couple more minutes here. About one more minute. Okay, all right, time's up. Any questions or concerns about this exercise? Was this helpful in kind of getting down that timeline for your project?
Hi, Aran.
I
I have a difficult in the part that I need to empathize first. I need to do the interviews and talk to people for then define then either ideate prototype. Like for me, it doesn't make so much sense to do everything now, because if I put what I want to ideate, I don't need to do the interviews. I don't need to talk to people. So I have the difficult to connect. I'm being very straight in my vision, and I don't think like that. I think we candidate, but I don't know how to do that without talk to people first.
Oh yeah, you absolutely have to talk to people first. That's essential. If you spend the next 6 weeks talking to people, that's fine. You know, you need that project foundation. You need that essential place from which to start. So however long you think you need to spend on that. When you start defining what that problem statement is, a great way to do that is how might we? That's what we use in design thinking. So you know, say for instance, in our case with Rosa, who was stranded in her apartment because of asthma, how might we design a support system so Rosa can stay connected to neighbors, for instance? That could be a starting point, right? So I really like the idea of using that how might we phrase, because it opens up and it's starting from a positive place too. And that really helps. So think about using a how might we statement when you start to define, and you start to really define after you interview. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to talk. Yes, okay. So yes, for me, this design was very useful because as Juliana, I was thinking about, okay, I have an idea of my project, but I want to start just with define and I ideate a process, but it's important to empathize first to understand my community target, I think, and then through this process of talking with those, I think maybe we can get some ideas to improve our previous ideas. Yes. And that's why I want to start to engage the essential stakeholders, because the core team, I think that I have part of it, so I can start to talk with my with sorry, give me a second. Yes, and sorry, and I want to start to talk with the person who managed my resident, because she is the person who can give me the permissions to talk with everybody in my resident to start all of these surveys and these questions that I have to have or to implement in my process of the project. So thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah, great. And keep going on these timelines. This is just a starting point and a framework, but just keep working on them as you see fit.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. I'm so grateful for this time that we got to spend with you. It's really helpful to kind of have that really concrete process that we can look to when we're stuck and when we need to kind of get moving. And I will definitely be uploading these slides, Erin, if that's okay with you, to our Google Classroom so everybody can refer back to those. And just, yeah, I want to thank you so much. I know we're at time here, and I want to save a little bit of time at the end of the session because I think folks will have questions for their proposals, which are due on Monday. But thank you so much for joining us, Erin. Your work is incredible and so timely, I think, for all of us as we're just in this transition phase, starting to really dig into our projects and think through them in a deeper way. So we really appreciate you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Should I stay on the meeting or?
You're totally welcome to if you want
Okay.
to. You're also free to head out. And I'll be here. I'll definitely be in touch with you shortly, either way.
Okay, I'll stay on for the rest of the meeting, and then I'll make sure to send you the slides.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you, everyone.
awesome. Sounds good. So I just, Judy and I wanted to make time, as you all know, your proposals are due on Monday. And we just wanted to kind of make time for anybody who has questions, anyone who might be confused about any aspect of the project, and also just give you some clarification. So before we get into questions, let me give you a little bit of clarification around, what's going to be happening moving forward. So basically, for the next 6 weeks in the course, which is kind of what's left to us, we will be focusing pretty much full time on our projects. Now, once you submit, basically what happens, we'll have time in our session on Monday, which will be slightly shortened. We'll have time to work through our project proposals. And the idea there is just that we will have time in climate action groups, which we're actually reforming the climate action groups to be projects have kind of shifted over the weeks, and which is totally fine. That's kind of a natural part of this process. But we're kind of shifting some of the groups around to focus on others who are working on more closely aligned or similar projects. There's kind of 4 groups that have emerged who are all kind of working in a very similar area. And so we thought it would be great for you to be able to share resources and support each other through the process, especially in those Monday sessions. So on Monday, we'll have time to refine any of your proposal ideas, and then submit those to us during and after that session. So I just want you to know that you will have a little bit of time in that session on Monday to to ask questions. Judy and I and the TAs will be present, and you can kind of ask any last minute questions. But really, this is just like a last hour to kind of just refine anything that needs refining. Really, I think we would like you to have the full proposal laid out in advance of the session this Monday. And then in terms of the timeline, there will be there'll be checkpoints. So once you submit your proposals, we'll go through them, and for projects that there's kind of an approval process that we'd like all of the project proposals to go through, just to make sure, this is really just to make sure that you're on track, that everything is laid out clearly, that your timeline is coherent, and that you've set an achievable goal for the next 6 weeks that you can feasibly meet by the end of the course. And we'll get back to you by Wednesday of next week. So that's Wednesday, the 3rd of November. And if you receive project approval by the 3rd of November, obviously you're also building budgets as part of your proposals. These budgets should be fairly straightforward and just, expressing exactly the kinds of materials, tools that you might need, and also, allocating a little bit for yourself to be able to carve out the time required to get this project done. So if you think about it, for the next 6 weeks, we have, the Monday and Saturday times. And then we will also have the hour of outside class time that we've all committed to. So that's about 4 hours a week for the next 6 weeks. So thinking about your timeline, try to think about what you can get done. And then we'll have, so that'll be, the first half of funding will be kind of distributed after you receive approval on Wednesday. And so your project will either receive approval on Monday, or you'll receive notes and feedback and a meeting request from Judy or I. So there are some projects that might need a little bit more time, a little bit more refinement, which is also fine. It just means that we just want to make sure that you're in a solid standing and you're really ready to go off and do the work that you need to do. And we'll still be meeting consistently so that we can support you in that process. The other, I think it's actually 3 weeks after the first funding round, there'll be a second funding round. So the second half of your project will get funded a few weeks in, after you've kind of met some of your initial goals, some of those short-term or goals for how you want to go about your project that you've laid out in the proposal. And then right at the end, I think it's December 14th and 15th, we'll have, time for project presentations. And there will be some, like financial reward for projects that are particularly thoughtful, creative, projects that have kind of met their vision or exceeded it. And this award is just for those really intentional projects. So that will sort of happen towards all of this will come to you in writing. I know it's a lot of information. We'll send it to you in writing later today. But I just wanted to give everyone a heads up before especially since you're working on your proposals right now. And then I think that's everything that I wanted to share. Judy, did you have anything you wanted to share? Mhm.
Yeah, I do. So I want to, I'm seeing some questions also in chat. So I wanted to kind of collectively clarify. So we do want a project that has a completion in 6 weeks. That doesn't mean that your project has to end, but there has to be a goal that you set that you achieve. So there is a completion date. So you can call it a phase 1. I think that the words that I'm thinking about for your projects that maybe should be a guidepost: feasible, creative, impactful, and able to be completed in 6 weeks. And I drafted just like a simple example, just because it popped into my head last night. But if you thought about making a film about climate justice for kids, and you wanted to design your process, your first 3 weeks might be draft script, scout locations, identify team, engage constituents, get permissions. Your last 3 weeks might be rehearse, shoot, and edit. So I tried to break something down in its simplest form, just to give you the opportunity to think about simplicity, because just because something's simple doesn't mean that it's not unbelievably impactful. So think about that. If you think about 6 weeks, what can I accomplish in 6 weeks? Imagine I'm just finishing Project Green Challenge, and we're getting all the kids' final reflections in 30 days, and they're mind-blowing. So you don't know what you're capable of until you attempt. So attempt and be really thoughtful. And I think just in terms of the funding, the way my brain kind of wrapped itself around it is your first funding is your seed funding. So it's giving you the opportunity to cover some expenses. Maybe you have to transport yourself, things that are going to be hard costs that you need to spend. Your second round of funding is going to be really based on some deliverables that we give you, but really executing on your proposal. So however you divide up your deliverables in your proposal will be really how you're judged for your second round of funding. And as Natasha mentioned, the award funding is really the opportunity to just say thank you for working really hard on your projects and executing on them. And then, really hoping that the thought process continues. So if this is your phase 1, what might you want to do in the future also? And so, as Natasha mentioned, this will be clearly contextualized for you, so you'll have it on Monday. But just think about what can you accomplish in 6 weeks if you really set out your process and utilize what Aran just offered you and everything that you've learned over the past 7-8 weeks, and just be brilliant like you are. And we are totally here at the other end for you 24/7. Just reach out and we'll respond. Do you guys have any questions we're 1 minute over, but just in case you do, I'm happy to take them, and Tasha's happy as well. All right. You guys are going to rock the world just because you can. All right. Thanks, everybody. Erin, thank you for your presentation and planting a lot of new seeds for everybody to think about.
Yes, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Judy, for that. Looking forward to seeing you all on Monday and to reading your proposals. Bye, everyone. And feel free to stay on if you have a question.